The black card declined with a sound that echoed through the boutique like a death knell. Marcus Washington stood 48 floors above Dallas, watching the city lights flicker like dying stars. His reflection in the glass, a black man in his late 30s, sharp jawline, close-cropped fade, eyes that had seen too much, stared back at him with the cold calculation of someone who had just discovered the truth. While his mother-in-law helped his wife's lover select which designer watch looked more distinguished, Marcus was on the phone, systematically dismantling the financial empire they thought belonged to them. They believed the penthouse was his wife's inheritance. They had no idea that the deed, every credit line they flaunted, every luxury they breathed, all of it had his name etched in the fine print. By the time their bags hit the counter, the transaction would be declined. His revenge was the only thing they would never be able to charge to his account. My name is Marcus Elijah Washington, and if you looked at the scene unfolding in my dining room that Thursday evening, you'd think I was living the American dream, the version they don't put in the brochures for people who look like me. The floor-to-ceiling windows of our penthouse framed downtown Dallas like a painting. Inside, the air was chilled to a perfect 68 degrees, carrying the scent of expensive candles and the rich aroma of my grandmother's gumbo, a recipe passed down through 4 generations of Washington family matriarchs. I'd spent 6 hours getting it right. The roux dark as mahogany, the okra tender, the andouille sausage singing with spice. "It's hearty," Victoria Ashford said, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension that comes from old money and new Botox. She prodded at a piece of sausage with her fork like it might bite back. "Very urban, Marcus. It reminds me of that little hole-in-the-wall place Jonathan's driver took us to once. Authentic, I suppose. Very working class." I tightened my grip on my napkin beneath the table, but my face remained smooth. A skill I'd perfected in boardrooms full of people who looked like Victoria. "I followed your family recipe exactly, Victoria," I said evenly. "Down to the last pinch of cayenne." "Oh, I'm sure you did, dear," she replied, her smile as genuine as a $3 bill. "But some things require a certain pedigree. You can give someone a recipe, but that doesn't make them a chef. Don't worry though, Jessica loves simple food. Don't you, darling?" Jessica didn't look up. My wife, 5'7", honey blonde hair, green eyes that once made my heart race, was hunched over her phone, thumbs moving frantically. The blue light illuminated her face like a crime scene photograph. "Jessica," I said softly. "Yeah, it's great, babe. Thanks." She shoveled a spoonful into her mouth without tasting it, her eyes never leaving the screen. Victoria beamed, turning back to me. "See? She's so easy to please. That's my Jessica, always grateful even for the basics." She took a sip of the vintage Cabernet I'd decanted an hour earlier, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light. "Speaking of gratitude, the service at Neiman's today was absolutely dreadful. I had to wait 15 minutes for someone to bring me the limited edition Hermes scarf I wanted. You'd think when they see a black card, they'd move faster." She pulled the sleek black credit card from her Chanel purse and placed it on the table like a trophy. "Thank goodness my credit is impeccable. And thank you, Jessica, for ensuring your mother is taken care of. It's nice to know at least one person in this family understands the value of legacy." I took a slow sip of water, washing down the bitterness rising in my throat. Victoria Ashford believed the penthouse we sat in, the Tesla in the garage, the black card she worshipped, all of it was Ashford family money. She believed her daughter was a successful venture capitalist, keeping the family name prestigious. She didn't know the truth. She didn't know that the deed to this penthouse had my name on it, Marcus E. Washington. She didn't know that the loan for the Tesla was under my social security number. And she certainly didn't know that the impeccable credit score she bragged about was actually mine. That black card? A supplementary card issued on my primary account. To the world, to this family, I was Marcus Ashford, the quiet husband with a tech job, who was lucky to have married into such a distinguished family. A black man who'd won the lottery by landing a white woman from old money. But in the financial district, behind the closed doors of secure server rooms and venture capital meetings, I was Marcus Washington, the silent founder of Apex Innovations, a fintech company that processed billions in transactions annually. I'd built the algorithms that revolutionized mobile banking for institutions that wouldn't have given Jessica's resume a second glance. I'd kept my work separate, partly for privacy, partly because early in our marriage Jessica had felt threatened by my success. So I let her play the big woman. I let her put her name on the mailbox. I let Victoria believe her daughter was the provider. "You're welcome, Mom," Jessica said absently, finally pocketing her phone. "Just don't go too crazy this month. Cash flow's a little tight." "Nonsense. Victoria waved her hand dismissively. Ashfords don't worry about cash flow. That's for people who shop at Target. She turned her gaze to me, her eyes narrowing. Marcus, speaking of help, make sure you take my cashmere wrap to the dry cleaners tomorrow. The one with the silk lining. And do be careful, last time whoever you sent it to almost ruined the fibers. I need it for the gala Saturday. Not a request. A command. The tone you'd use for hired help. I have a board meeting at 9, Victoria, I said, keeping my voice steady. Maybe Jessica can drop it off on her way to the office. Jessica looked up, startled. Come on, Marcus. I've got back-to-back meetings. Big deal's closing. Can't you just reschedule your Zoom thing? It's not a Zoom thing. It's a board meeting. Well, surely you can make time for family, Victoria interjected, dabbing her mouth delicately. A spouse's primary job is to ensure the household runs smoothly. That includes taking care of their partner's mother. I certainly did it for Jessica's father, and I never complained about having calls. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. Dinner was edible. I'm retiring to my suite. My shows are on. Don't forget the cashmere, Marcus. It's on the chair in the foyer. She walked away without clearing her plate. Jessica stood a moment later, patting her stomach. I'm beat. Hitting the sack. She leaned down to give me a perfunctory peck on the cheek. She smelled of expensive perfume and something else. Something musky and masculine that wasn't my cologne. You got cleanup? I always do, I whispered. She didn't hear me. She was already walking toward the bedroom, phone back in her hand. I sat alone at the long table, surrounded by dirty dishes and the remnants of a meal that had taken half my day to prepare. The silence pressed against my eardrums like deep water. I stood and began clearing the table, stacking the fine china plates one by one. In the kitchen, under the stark LED lighting, I loaded the dishwasher, the rhythmic clatter filling the empty space. When the machine began its hum, I leaned against the cold marble countertop and looked at my reflection in the darkened window. I saw a black man in a silk button-down, hair perfectly lined, standing in a kitchen that cost more than most people earned in a year. I saw a man who ran a company valued in the 9 figures. I saw a man who could buy this entire building if he wanted to. And yet, in that reflection I also saw a ghost. A man who had everything on paper but owned nothing in his own home. A wallet with a pulse. A convenience. A background character in the Jessica and Victoria show. I looked at the black card Victoria had left on the counter, expecting me to put it back in her purse for her. It glinted under the recessed lighting. My name wasn't printed on the front of that specific card. But the debt it incurred was etched into my financial soul. I picked it up, feeling the weight of the plastic. It felt heavy, loaded with entitlement and lies. Not for long, I said to the empty room. The words hung in the air, a promise made to the reflection in the glass. I placed the card down, not in her purse but on the counter, right next to the sink where water was still dripping. One slow drop at a time. The 48th floor of Apex Innovations felt like a different planet compared to the suffocating atmosphere of my penthouse. Here the air was filtered and cool, carrying the faint hum of servers and the scent of possibility rather than judgment. Good morning, Mr. Washington, a junior analyst said, nodding respectfully as I passed his glass-walled office. He didn't ask me to pick up dry cleaning. He didn't critique my cooking. He simply acknowledged the man who signed his paycheck. I walked into my private office, my footsteps echoing authority on the polished concrete floor. I sat behind my desk, a sprawling expanse of black walnut that served as the command center for my empire. To Jessica and Victoria, I was Marcus, the house husband who did something with computers. Here, I was the architect of a fintech ecosystem that moved billions across borders in milliseconds. I woke my computer and 3 monitors flickered to life. My morning ritual was always the same. Check Asian markets, review overnight liquidity reports, and then, out of professional paranoia, review my personal household accounts. I pulled up the dashboard for the family accounts. Usually, it offered me a sense of control. Today, however, a spike in the supplementary credit line caught my eye. The card ending in 4098. Victoria's card. I frowned, tapping my finger against the desk. Victoria liked to spend. Her love language was retail therapy, provided someone else was paying. But usually her expenses were predictable. Neiman Marcus, the salon on McKinney Avenue, country club dues. This month was different. The expenditure curve was erratic, showing sharp peaks on Thursday nights. I drilled down into the raw data, my eyes scanning merchant IDs and timestamps. Thursday, October 12th, $400 at the Velvet Room, a jazz lounge downtown known for intimate corners and dim lighting. Thursday, October 19th, $550 at Skyline Ember, a rooftop restaurant famous for romantic alcoves and overpriced wagyu. Thursday, October 26th, $700 at Lux Galleria, specifically in the men's contemporary section, followed immediately by a $250 charge at a spa in the design district. My stomach lurched. Thursday. I opened my calendar. Cross-referenced the dates. October 12th. Jessica said she had a late client dinner in Fort Worth. October 19th. Jessica claimed her car broke down and she was waiting for a tow for 3 hours. October 26th. Just last week. Jessica said she had to fly to Houston for an emergency consultation. The data points were aligning in a way that made my chest tight. Why was my mother-in-law charging dinners at romantic restaurants on the exact nights her daughter was supposedly working late? I tried to rationalize it. Maybe Victoria was meeting friends. Maybe she had a secret social life. But Skyline Ember? That place was strictly for couples. It wasn't where a 60-year-old woman took her book club. And then there was the consistency. Every single Thursday. My phone buzzed on the desk. A text from Darius Chin, my college roommate who now worked as an investigative journalist for the Dallas Observer. The preview on the screen was short. "Bro, I'm so sorry but you need to see this." My heart hammered against my ribs. I unlocked the phone. There was an image attached. It was candid, likely taken with a zoom lens, but the quality was sharp enough to be undeniable. The setting was Lux Galleria. I recognized the marble floors and the distinctive gold fixtures. In the center of the frame sat Jessica. She was not in Houston. She was sitting on a plush velvet ottoman, her jacket off, her arm draped possessively around the waist of a man I'd never met. He was young, maybe 25, with styled dark hair and a designer outfit that cost more than my first car. He was looking at Jessica with adoration that made me nauseous. His name, according to the caption Darius had typed, was Cameron Pierce. But it was the third person in the photo that made the air leave my lungs. Sitting opposite them, beaming like a proud parent at a graduation, was Victoria. She was holding up a watch, showing it to Cameron. And in her other hand, caught in high-definition clarity, was the black card. My black card. She was handing it to a sales associate who stood hovering with a tray of champagne. I stared at the image. I didn't blink. I didn't scream. I felt a cold, creeping numbness start at my fingertips and work its way up my arms. I turned back to my monitors. Pulled up the transaction log for today. Pending transaction. Lux Galleria. 11:42 a.m. $1,450. I looked at the clock on the wall in the photo behind Jessica's head. It read 11:42. The timestamp on the bank server, 11 hours 42 minutes and 30 seconds. The pieces clicked together with the deafening finality of a vault door slamming shut. Jessica wasn't just cheating on me. That was a cliché. That was a mundane tragedy. This was something far more intricate and cruel. My wife was cheating on me with a man. And her mother wasn't just condoning it, she was chaperoning it. She was financing his wardrobe using the credit line I provided. They were a team. A parasitic unit feeding off my labor, my success, and my naivety. They were sitting there, drinking champagne that I paid for, laughing at jokes I wasn't part of, buying gifts for a man who was sleeping with my wife. All on my dime. I looked at Victoria's face in the photo again. She looked happier than I'd ever seen her. She looked like she was grooming a replacement. I set the phone down gently on the desk. The urge to cry was there, somewhere deep down, buried under layers of shock. But it was weak. It was being rapidly overtaken by something else. A cold, hard clarity. I was a CEO. I managed risk. I managed assets. I cut losses. They thought I was just a source of funds. They thought I was the silent partner in their life of luxury, too busy or too stupid to notice the drain on resources. They had mistaken my quietness for weakness. They had mistaken my generosity for stupidity. I took a breath and the air felt sharper, cleaner. If they looked at me and saw nothing but a bank account, then I would stop trying to be a husband or a son-in-law. I would become exactly what they treated me as. I would become the institution. And institutions don't have feelings. They have policies. They have penalties. And most importantly, they have the power to foreclose. Transaction error, I whispered, my voice devoid of any tremor. System failure imminent. I reached for my mouse, my hands steady. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't going to throw clothes out on the lawn. That was messy. That was emotional. I was going to handle this the way I handled everything else at Apex Innovations. I was going to audit them. And then I was going to liquidate the assets. If you want to play with my money, I said to the smiling faces on my phone screen, then you're going to have to survive the market correction. That night, the penthouse was quiet. But for the first time the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt strategic. I walked through the foyer, my footsteps silent on the marble. There was a note on the counter from Jessica, scrawled in her messy handwriting. At the hospital visiting a client who took a turn. Don't wait up. It was the kind of lie designed to make me feel guilty for even suspecting her. Victoria had texted saying she was at a charity committee meeting. I knew exactly where they were. They were likely at Skyline Ember again, or perhaps unwrapping more boxes at Cameron's apartment, paid for with the swipe of a card that linked back to my server. I didn't turn on the main lights. I liked the shadows. They felt appropriate for what I was about to do. I walked into the master closet, pushed aside a row of Jessica's winter coats I'd bought her for our trip to Aspen last year, and revealed the wall safe. My fingers moved automatically over the keypad. The beep of the lock disengaging sounded like the starting gun of a race. I pulled out a thick leather-bound folder. Inside were the papers that defined the legal reality of our marriage, a reality Jessica and Victoria had conveniently chosen to ignore. First, the deed to the penthouse. Beautiful document on heavy cream paper. The name on the owner's line was clear, Marcus E. Washington. The date was 3 years prior to our wedding. A premarital asset protected by ironclad Texas property laws. Next, the prenuptial agreement. I remembered the day Jessica signed it. She'd laughed, waving her hand dismissively. Babe, I don't care about the paperwork. I'd sign anything to be with you. She'd signed it without reading the clauses on asset separation or the infidelity penalty. She'd been so confident in her role as the Ashford heir that she never suspected the quiet black man she was marrying was actually a shark in sheep's clothing. Finally, the Apex Innovations corporate file. I turned to the payroll section. There was Jessica's name. She believed she was a strategic consultant for the firm, a title I'd created to give her dignity. She believed the $18,000 deposited into her account every month was a salary for her networking efforts. I ran my finger over the classification code next to her payment. It didn't say salary. It said discretionary spousal stipend. Legally, she wasn't an employee. She was a dependent. She was on an allowance just like a teenager. Only she was too arrogant to realize it. I closed the folder and walked to my desk. I opened a fresh notebook, the spine cracking satisfyingly as I flattened it against the wood. I uncapped a black fountain pen. At the top of the first page I wrote 3 words. Project Zero Balance. My hand didn't shake. This wasn't a diary entry about a broken heart. This was a business plan. If I treated this as a marital dispute, I would lose my composure. I would scream and cry and ask why. But if I treated this as a hostile corporate takeover, or rather, a liquidation of non-performing assets, I could remain cold. I could remain efficient. I needed data. The photo from Darius was a good start, but it was just a snapshot. I needed a comprehensive audit of their betrayal. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd stored years ago for background checks on potential investors. This is Washington, I said when the voice answered. I need a full surveillance package. Target is Jessica Ashford Washington. Secondary target is Victoria Ashford. I want a timeline of their movements for the last 6 months. I want to know who they meet, where they go, and exactly how much of my money they're spending while they're there. And I need to know the extent of the mother's involvement. Is she just an observer, or is she facilitating? Consider it done, Mr. Washington, the investigator replied. Do you want the raw feed? Filter nothing, I said. I want to see every transaction. The next morning, I went to work as if nothing had happened. I wore my armor, a tailored navy suit, and sat at the head of the conference table in the Apex boardroom. We were discussing the acquisition of a smaller rival firm, a deal worth $60 million. The lawyers were arguing about intellectual property rights. The bankers were shouting about interest rates. Usually, I thrived on this energy. But today, every time I blinked, I saw the image of Jessica's hand on Cameron's waist. I saw Victoria's smile as she handed over my credit card. Jessica texted me at 10 a.m. Morning, babe. Meetings are brutal today. Might be late tonight again. Love you. I looked at the phone screen. A day ago, I would have sent back a heart emoji and a reminder to eat lunch. Today, I stared at the words love you and analyzed them as if they were fraudulent code. Mr. Washington, my CFO asked, looking at me with concern. Do we agree to the terms on the liquidity provision? I looked up. The room was waiting. I forced the image of Jessica out of my head and replaced it with the balance sheet. No, I said, my voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. They're over-leveraged. We cut the offer by 15%. Take it or leave it. The room went silent. It was a ruthless move. Are you sure? The opposing counsel asked. I know what their assets are really worth, I said, my tone flat. And I know when someone is trying to sell me a fantasy. As I said the words, a realization hit me. It settled in my chest, cold and heavy. I was negotiating with these sharks, controlling the flow of millions of dollars, yet I was letting a woman with a fake job and her narcissistic mother treat me like a limitless ATM. I was the CEO here. Why was I playing the submissive spouse at home? If I could manipulate the market, if I could force a competitor to their knees with a single contract clause, I could certainly handle the Ashford family. I looked down at my laptop. The banking portal was still open in a background tab. I didn't need to wait for the investigator's full report to fire the first shot. A war is won by cutting off the enemy's supply lines. And Jessica and Victoria had no supply lines of their own. They only had the ones I provided. The meeting ended. I returned to my office. I closed the door and locked it. The blinds were drawn, casting the room in a dim, serious light. I sat down and pulled up the credit card management screen. Victoria was likely at Lux Galleria right now. It was Thursday after all. She and Cameron were probably laughing, picking out accessories, confident that the magic plastic card would take care of everything. I watched the cursor hover over the Manage Cards button. I wasn't the weeping spouse anymore. I wasn't the man trying to earn his mother-in-law's approval with gumbo. I was the chief executive officer of my own life, and I had just identified a massive liability. I clicked on Victoria's profile. Card status, active. Credit limit, $50,000. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted a limp. I picked up my desk phone and dialed the priority banking line. Apex Private Client Services. The operator answered instantly. How can I help you, Mr. Washington? I leaned back in my leather chair, the light from the laptop screen reflecting in my eyes. I imagined the scene at the store. I imagined the moment the cashier would swipe the card. I imagined the confusion, then the embarrassment, then the panic. I need to make an immediate change to the authorized users on my primary account, I said, my voice steady and hard as steel. I believe there has been a security breach. I need you to decline all incoming transactions starting now. Certainly, sir. Which card? The one ending in 4098, I said. And while you're at it, flag the account for suspected fraud. I hung up the phone. The silence returned to the office, but this time it felt like the quiet before a magnificent storm. The air inside Lux Galleria was perfumed with white tea and aggressive exclusivity. It was a place where price tags were tucked discreetly inside garments because if you had to look, you clearly didn't belong. Under the crystal chandeliers, Victoria Ashford was holding court. She sat on a plush velvet settee, a glass of complimentary Veuve Clicquot in one hand, gesturing with the other toward a pair of leather loafers that Cameron Pierce was modeling. Oh, those are simply divine on you, darling, Victoria cooed. They make you look so sophisticated. Much more elegant than what Jessica is used to seeing at home. Cameron giggled, doing a little turn. You have the best taste, Victoria. Honestly, you're like a second mom to me already. That word, mom, echoed in the space between them. It was a title I had never been allowed to use. To Victoria, I was always Marcus, or simply he. But this man, this 25-year-old who was helping Jessica spend her non-existent fortune, had earned the title after a few months of illicit rendezvous. Miles away in the hermetically sealed silence of my private office at Apex Innovations, I watched the digital clock on my wall flip to 1:15 p.m. I was not sipping champagne. I was sipping lukewarm water, and my phone was on speaker mode, resting on the mahogany desk like a loaded weapon. For security reasons, Mr. Washington, the voice of the senior fraud analyst at the bank said, can you confirm that you want to proceed with this action? This will freeze all supplementary cards associated with the primary account immediately. I looked at the photograph on my computer screen again. The one Darius had sent. Victoria's smile. The black card. Yes, I said. My voice was calm, almost bored. I'm confirming. I've noticed a pattern of irregular spending that doesn't align with the authorized user's profile. Suspected misuse. Understood, the banker replied, the sound of keyboard clacking audible in the background. And you want the notification alerts rerouted? Correct, I said, leaning back in my chair. Remove Jessica Ashford's email and phone number from the alert list. Send all fraud warnings and decline notifications directly to my private encrypted email. I don't want the users to be alarmed by a system error until I can investigate it personally. Done, the banker said. The block is effective as of now. Back at Lux Galleria, the mood was reaching a fever pitch. Victoria had piled a mountain of goods onto the counter. The loafers, a limited edition belt, 2 silk ties, and a cashmere scarf that looked suspiciously like the one she'd ordered me to take to the dry cleaners. "Wrap them up," Victoria commanded the sales associate. "And send them to my address." "Oh, actually, Cameron, why don't you take the loafers now? You can wear them to dinner tonight." "You spoil me," Cameron squealed, clapping his hands. Victoria preened, adjusting her diamond brooch. "The Ashfords take care of their own. Put it on the black card." She reached into her purse and produced the card with a flourish, holding it between 2 fingers like a magician revealing a winning ace. She handed it to the sales associate, not even glancing at the total, which I could see on my banking dashboard was nearing $5,200. The sales associate took the card with reverence. She dipped it into the chip reader. Victoria took a sip of champagne, winking at Cameron. Beep. The sound was sharp and dissonant against the soft jazz playing in the store. The sales associate frowned slightly. She pulled the card out and wiped the chip on her blazer. "Sorry, Mrs. Ashford. The machine's being a little temperamental today. Let me try again." "Technology," Victoria sighed, rolling her eyes at Cameron. "Always failing us when we need it most." The associate inserted the card again. Beep. The screen on the register flashed a bright, undeniable red. "Declined. Call issuer." The silence that followed was louder than the beep. The associate looked up, her cheeks flushing pink. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," she said, her voice dropping to a discreet whisper. "It says the transaction has been declined." Victoria's laugh was brittle. "Declined? That's impossible. That's a limitless card. My daughter pays the bill in full every month. Run it again." "I've run it twice, ma'am," the associate said, glancing nervously at the line of customers forming behind them. A woman in a Chanel suit was tapping her foot impatiently. "Well, then punch in the numbers manually," Victoria snapped, her veneer of sophistication cracking. "Do I have to tell you how to do your job?" The associate obeyed, her fingers trembling slightly as she keyed in the 16 digits. Victoria tapped her nails against the glass counter, a frantic rhythm. Cameron stopped smiling. He looked down at the loafers he was already wearing, suddenly looking less like a prince and more like a shoplifter. Beep. "It's a hard decline, ma'am," the associate said, her voice firm now. She set the card down on the glass. "Do you have another form of payment?" The question hung in the air like a foul odor. "Excuse me, another customer," the woman in the Chanel suit leaned forward. "Is this going to take long? Some of us actually have valid cards." Victoria's face turned a violent shade of crimson. "How dare you? Do you know who I am? I'm Victoria Ashford." She scrambled into her purse, her hands shaking. She pulled out a second card, a platinum visa, also a supplementary card on my account. She thrust it at the girl. "Try this one." Beep. Declined. She pulled out a third. An American Express Gold. Beep. Declined. "Is there perhaps a card in your own name?" the sales associate asked gently, a question that was unintentional but struck Victoria like a physical slap. Victoria Ashford did not have cards in her own name. She had not had a credit check since 1998. Cameron stepped back, creating physical distance between himself and Victoria. "Victoria, everyone is staring," he hissed. "Just fix it." "I'm trying." Victoria shrieked. She grabbed her phone and dialed Jessica. It went to voicemail. "Useless," she muttered. Desperate, sweating, feeling the eyes of the entire store burning into her back, she scrolled to the one number she swore she would never need. My phone rang in the quiet office. I watched the name Victoria flash on the screen. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. I took a slow breath, composing myself. On the 5th ring I answered. I made my voice sound thick and groggy as if I'd been deep asleep. "Hello?" I mumbled. "Victoria? Is everything okay?" "Marcus." Victoria screamed into the receiver. "What did you do? What did you do to the cards?" I yawned audibly. "What? The cards? What time is it?" I was taking a nap. "I have a migraine." "Don't play games with me," she yelled. "I'm at Lux Galleria and the card was declined. I'm being humiliated. Fix it. Call the bank right now." "Declined?" I asked, injecting a note of slow, confused concern into my voice. "That's strange. Are you sure you're using the right PIN? Sometimes if the chip is dirty." "The chip is not dirty," she roared. "They're saying it's locked. Call Jessica." "She's not picking up." "Jessica's in a meeting, Victoria," I said soothingly. "And I can't call the bank right now. I don't have the security tokens with me. I left them, somewhere." Look, it's probably just a system glitch. Why don't you just use cash? Or have your friend pay? My friend. Victoria sputtered. She looked at Cameron, whose face was a mask of irritation. I really need to go back to sleep, Victoria, I said. My head is splitting. We can talk about this when you get home. Just, come home. Wait. Don't you dare hang. I tapped the red button. The call ended. In the boutique, the silence was absolute. Victoria slowly lowered the phone. The sales associate was waiting. The security guard near the door had taken a step closer. Victoria turned to Cameron. Her face was pale, her arrogance stripped away, leaving behind a frightened old woman. Cameron, darling, she stammered. It seems there's a mix-up with the bank. A computer error. Could you handle this one? Jessica will reimburse you immediately, tonight, with interest. Cameron looked at the pile of clothes. He looked at the loafers he wanted. He looked at the customers smirking behind them. He let out a huff of pure annoyance. Fine, he snapped. But this is embarrassing, Victoria. Really embarrassing. Cameron dug into his own wallet and pulled out a card. It wasn't a black card. It was a standard debit card, chipped and worn. He shoved it at the cashier with the aggression of someone who knows they're losing money they can't afford to lose. As the transaction went through, Cameron glared at Victoria. The mom fantasy was dead. Now Victoria was just a broke old woman who had made him pay for his own gift. Back in my office, I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out over the sprawling metropolis of Dallas. Somewhere down there, in the luxury district, two people were walking out of a store carrying bags that felt heavier than they should, bound by a resentment that would only fester. I checked my email. A notification from the bank had just arrived. Alert. Multiple decline transactions attempted at Lux Galleria. I smiled, a cold, sharp expression that reflected in the glass. Transaction declined, I whispered to the city below. Revenge approved. The war didn't begin with an explosion. It began with a series of quiet administrative clicks that severed the lifelines of the Ashford household one by one. I had turned off the tap. And now I was simply watching the pipes run dry. The morning after the disaster at Lux Galleria, Victoria was pacing the foyer in a vintage Chanel suit, checking her diamond watch every 30 seconds. She was scheduled to attend the Children's Hospital charity luncheon, the kind of event where Dallas socialites paid $2,500 a plate to eat rubbery chicken and gossip about who'd gotten the worst facelift. I was in the kitchen drinking black coffee and pretending to read a tablet, though I was actually monitoring the security feed from the front drive. Where is he? Victoria snapped, her voice shrill. Stevens is never late. And Ashford should not be kept waiting. She pulled out her phone and dialed the private car service that had chauffeured her around for the last 5 years. I took a sip of coffee, savoring the bitterness. Hello? Victoria barked into the phone. This is Victoria Ashford. My driver is 10 minutes late. This is unacceptable. There was a pause. I watched her face transform from indignation to confusion, and then to a pale, horrified shock. What do you mean, account suspended? She hissed. That's ridiculous. We have a standing contract. Pause. By whom? The primary account holder? But that's... She stopped. She didn't look at me. She couldn't bring herself to admit that I was the primary account holder. To admit it would be to shatter the illusion she'd built her entire life around. Fine, she yelled, hanging up. I'll find another way. I don't need your second-rate service anyway. She looked at me, her eyes darting nervously. Marcus dear, could you? I'm already late for a compliance audit, Victoria, I said, grabbing my keys. I can't drive you. You have the Uber app, don't you? It's very convenient. I walked out the door before she could respond. 5 minutes later, from the safety of my own car parked down the street, I watched Victoria Ashford climb into a dented beige Honda Civic that had a massive dent in the rear bumper. The driver was wearing a t-shirt that said, "I'd rather be fishing." It was the first time in 30 years Victoria had ridden in a vehicle that cost less than $50,000. While Victoria was suffering through the indignity of a cloth back seat, Jessica was fighting her own battle. I knew this because I had cloned her phone notifications to my secure server. She was in the master bedroom, likely sitting on the edge of the bed, frantically trying to do damage control with Cameron. The text messages were flooding in. Cameron, you humiliated me. My friends are laughing at me. You said you were rich. Jessica, baby, please. It was a bank error. I promise. I'm fixing it right now. Cameron, fix it with a transfer. I want that belt today. I watched the digital log as Jessica opened her banking app. She attempted to transfer $3,000 to Cameron via Zelle. Transaction failed. Insufficient funds. She tried again. $1,000. Transaction failed. Insufficient funds. She checked her balance. It was currently sitting at $4,216. Today was the 15th of the month. It was the day her salary from Apex Innovations usually hit her account. But yesterday, I had instructed payroll to remove her from the automated clearinghouse system. There was no paycheck. There was no bonus. There was only the harsh reality of a zero-sum game. I could imagine her refreshing the screen over and over again, sweating, wondering why the magical money fairy had died. By the time I returned home late that evening, deliberately missing dinner to avoid a direct confrontation, the penthouse felt different. The air conditioning, usually set to a brisk Arctic chill, was off. The air was stale and warm. I walked into the living room. The lights were dim. Not the romantic dim of mood lighting, but the gloom of conservation. Jessica was sitting on the sofa, staring at the massive 80-inch television screen. It was black. "Internet's down," she muttered, not looking at me. "And the cable says we need to upgrade our subscription or something. Did you change the plan?" "Oh, I audited our household expenses," I said breezily, dropping my bag on the chair. "We were paying for the premium gigabit package and 500 channels we never watch. I switched us to the basic tier. Saves us about $250 a month. Fiscal responsibility, right? Basic tier?" Jessica looked at me as if I'd spoken in tongues. "Marcus, the basic tier buffers if you try to stream in 4K. I can't watch the game like this." "You can watch it at a sports bar," I suggested. "Although beers are getting expensive these days." I walked past her toward the kitchen, where a new crisis was brewing. Our housekeeper, Mrs. Alvarez, was standing by the refrigerator with her arms crossed. She'd been with us for 3 years, a patient woman who tolerated Victoria's demands because I paid her 20% above market rate. "Mr. Washington," she said, "we have a problem." "What is it, Mrs. Alvarez?" She opened the refrigerator door. It was cavernous and white and almost entirely empty. Usually it was stocked with organic produce, imported cheeses, sparkling water. Now there was a half-empty carton of milk and a jar of pickles. "The grocery delivery didn't come," she said. "Whole Foods called. They said the card on file was declined. And the butcher said he can't send the steaks until the last invoice is paid." She lowered her voice. "And Mr. Washington, my check usually clears by noon. It's 7 p.m. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick envelope of cash I'd withdrawn earlier. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Alvarez," I said, loud enough for Victoria, who was sulking in the dining room, to hear. "I'm moving all household accounts to a new system. Here's your pay for the month, plus a bonus for the inconvenience. You can go home early tonight. Don't worry about dinner." "Thank you, sir," she said, taking the cash. "But what about food?" "There's nothing to cook." "I think there are some instant noodles in the pantry," I said. "Or maybe Victoria can use her cooking skills. She's always talking about how rustic food has so much character." Victoria let out a gasp of outrage from the other room, but she didn't come in. She couldn't. She had no leverage. Later that night, the final blow of the day landed. I was in my study, the door cracked open just enough to hear the phone ring in the hallway. Victoria picked it up. "Hello?" I listened as the voice on the other end, the manager of the pristine country club where Victoria spent 4 days a week, delivered the news. "Mrs. Ashford, I'm afraid I have to make an uncomfortable call," the manager said, his voice polite, the kind of polite that's practiced in front of a mirror. "Your annual membership dues were returned by the bank today. And the outstanding tab for the last 3 months? Well, it's quite substantial." "There must be a mistake," Victoria cried, her voice cracking. "I've been a member since 1999. "We value your patronage, Mrs. Ashford," the manager continued. "But the board is very strict about accounts in arrears. If the balance of $28,000 is not settled by Friday, we'll have to suspend your privileges and remove your name from the locker room roster." The silence that followed was heavy. Being removed from the locker room roster was social suicide. It was worse than bankruptcy. It was irrelevance. I'll handle it," Victoria whispered, hanging up the phone. I sat in my study, the blue light of my laptop illuminating my face. The house was dark. The fridge was empty. The internet was crawling. The cars were gone. They were living in a museum of their former lives, surrounded by expensive furniture they didn't own and designer clothes they had no place to wear. It was a hollow wealth. A golden shell with nothing inside. My email pinged. It was the report from the private investigator. Subject, J. Ashford/C. Pierce. Surveillance summary. I opened the file. It was thorough. There were photos of Jessica and Cameron entering the Ritz-Carlton on a Tuesday afternoon, a Tuesday when Jessica had told me she was at a dental appointment. There was a video clip of them in her car, kissing at a red light. But the piece of evidence that made my blood turn to ice was a video taken just 3 days ago. It was shot through the window of a cafe. Victoria and Cameron were sitting at a small table. Victoria reached across the table and squeezed Cameron's hand. The investigator's directional microphone had picked up the audio clearly. "Don't worry about him," Victoria said, her face twisted in a sneer. "Marcus is just the bankroll. Once Jessica secures her position at the company, we'll cut him loose. You're the future Mr. Ashford, Cameron. You're the one who deserves the legacy." I paused the video. I stared at Victoria's face. "Legacy?" I whispered. She was talking about a legacy that I had built. She was plotting to replace me with the very money I had earned. They weren't just using me. They were actively planning my disposal. I closed the laptop with a snap. The sadness was gone. The shock was gone. All that was left was a cold, mathematical precision. I had gathered enough data. The beta testing phase was over. "System ready?" I said to the darkness. "Initiating public release." I picked up the folder containing the photos and the transcripts. I stood up and walked to the door. It was time to go into the living room. It was time to introduce the Ashfords to their new reality. I walked through the front door at exactly 7 p.m. I had timed my arrival with the precision of a Swiss watch, knowing that the hunger and humiliation of the last 24 hours would have fermented into a volatile cocktail of rage. Usually at this hour, the penthouse was dim, bathed in the soft amber glow of recessed mood lighting. Tonight, however, every light in the main living area was blazing. The chandeliers were on full power. The floor lamps were angled inward. The overhead track lighting was directed at the center of the room. It looked less like a home and more like an interrogation room at a police precinct. Victoria and Jessica were sitting on the long white Italian leather sofa. They were stiff, upright, their knees touching, presenting a united front. On the glass coffee table in front of them, the space was empty except for a single coaster placed with aggressive, deliberate care. I closed the door behind me. The lock clicked shut with a sound that echoed in the tense silence. "We need to talk," Victoria said. Her voice was not the shrill screech of the department store. It was low, trembling with a righteous indignation that she'd clearly spent all day rehearsing. I walked slowly into the room, my footsteps sinking into the plush rug. I did not sit down. I stood across from them, clutching my briefcase, letting the power dynamic shift. They were sitting. I was standing. They were waiting. I was arriving. "I agree," I said calmly. "We do." "Don't take that tone with me, Marcus," Victoria snapped. She stood up, unable to maintain her composure. She gestured around the room, her hands sweeping over the darkened television and the silent wine cooler. This punishment of yours has gone on long enough. You've embarrassed this family. You've cut off essential services. You've acted with a cruelty I didn't think you possessed." Jessica nodded, emboldened by her mother's lead. She looked tired. Her designer shirt was wrinkled, likely because the dry cleaning service had also been suspended. "Mom's right, Marcus," Jessica said, deepening her voice to sound authoritative. "You're being irrational. Just because there was a glitch at the bank, which I told you I'm fixing, doesn't mean you get to shut down the house. We have standards. We have a reputation." "A reputation," I repeated, tasting the word. "Is that what you call it?" "Yes," Victoria interjected, stepping forward. "The Ashford name means something in this city. We're not people who take UberX. We're not people who have our credit cards declined in front of shopgirls. You seem to forget, Marcus, that you're only in this penthouse, living this life because my daughter married you." She looked at me with genuine pity, a delusion so deep it was almost impressive. She truly believed it. She believed that her last name was a magical currency that paid the mortgage. "You're disrupting the natural order," Jessica added, crossing her arms. "As your wife, I'm telling you, no, I'm demanding, that you restore the cards and the allowances immediately. It's your duty as a spouse to support the household management. I don't know what kind of power trip you're on, but it ends tonight." I looked at Jessica. I looked at the woman I had once thought was my partner. I saw the fear behind her eyes. She wasn't demanding anything. She was begging. But she only knew the language of entitlement. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I didn't point out that household management shouldn't cost $50,000 a month. Instead, I walked to the glass coffee table. I unzipped my briefcase. The sound was like a zipper on a body bag. I pulled out a thick manila envelope and dropped it on the table. It hit the glass with a heavy, dull thud. "Open it," I said. Jessica hesitated, but Victoria, fueled by fury, reached out and tore the envelope open. Photos spilled out. They fanned across the glass surface like a deck of playing cards. There was Jessica, her hand on Cameron's thigh at the Ritz-Carlton. There was Victoria, clinking champagne glasses with Cameron at Skyline Ember. There was a grainy shot of Victoria hugging Cameron, her lips moving, caught in the act of calling him the future Mr. Ashford. There was a copy of the receipt for the diamond bracelet Jessica had bought Cameron for Valentine's Day, the same day she'd given me a card and a box of drugstore chocolates. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. It was a vacuum sucking the oxygen out of the air. Jessica's face drained of color. She looked like she was going to be sick. She recognized the dates. She recognized the locations. Victoria stared at the photos. Her eyes darted from one to the next, her brain struggling to process the breach of her fortress. Then she looked up at me, her eyes narrowing into slits of pure venom. "Fake," she spat. "Excuse me?" I asked, genuinely surprised by the speed of her denial. "This is fake," Victoria shouted, sweeping her hand across the table, knocking several photos onto the floor. "You photoshopped these. You hired someone to create these lies. You're trying to frame my daughter because you're insecure. You're trying to find a reason to divorce her and take half of her money." "Her money?" I said, my voice dropping an octave. "Yes, her money," Victoria screamed. "The Ashford fortune. You're nothing but a gold digger, Marcus. I always knew it. You trapped her. And now you're trying to destroy her to get a settlement." Jessica stayed silent, staring at the photo of her and Cameron entering a hotel room. She knew better. She knew it wasn't fake. But she was letting her mother fight the battle because she was a coward. I sighed. It was a long, weary exhalation. I reached back into my briefcase. "I expected you to say that," I said. I pulled out a second file. This one was bound in blue legal covers. I placed it gently on the table, right on top of the scattered photos. "This," I said, pointing to the document, "is the deed to this penthouse. Look at the date. November 4th, 2018. 3 years before Jessica and I were married." I flipped the page open. Owner, Marcus E. Washington, sole proprietor. Victoria froze. She looked at the paper, but she didn't want to read it. "And this," I continued, pulling out another document, "is the prenuptial agreement Jessica signed. Clause 4A, all assets acquired prior to the marriage remain the sole property of the original owner. Clause 7B, in the event of infidelity, the offending party forfeits all claims to spousal support." I looked at Jessica. "You signed it, Jessica. You didn't read it because you were too busy looking at your reflection in the window. But you signed it." "And finally," I said, producing a spreadsheet that was color-coded and terrifyingly detailed, "this is the financial breakdown of Apex Innovations, the company you think Jessica runs. She doesn't have a seat on the board. She doesn't have equity. She has a stipend. A stipend listed under family support." I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the table, leaning into their personal space. "This is not your daughter's house, Victoria," I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. "It never was. You're not the matriarch of a dynasty. You're not the lady of this manor. You're my tenant. You're an ungrateful, rude, and incredibly expensive tenant who's been living on my charity for 5 years." Victoria's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The reality was crashing down on her. The penthouse, the clothes, the food, the air conditioning, it wasn't Ashford money. It was Washington money. She'd been spitting in the face of the hand that fed her. "And you, Jessica," I said, turning to her, "you aren't a provider. You're a line item. And I'm auditing the budget." Jessica finally looked up. Her eyes were wet, but I felt nothing. The woman I loved had died the moment I saw her handing my credit card to another man. "Marcus, please," she whispered. "We can fix this." "No," I said, straightening up and zipping my briefcase closed. "We can't fix this. Because I'm not broken. You are." I turned toward the stairs. I had a guest room on the second floor with a sturdy lock. I intended to sleep soundly. "Where are you going?" Victoria whispered, her voice a shadow of its former volume. I paused on the first step and looked back at them. They looked small. They looked like strangers sitting in a waiting room for a train that had already left the station. "I'm going to bed," I said. "Jessica, I expect you at the Apex Innovations headquarters tomorrow morning. 10 a.m. sharp. Don't be late." "Why?" Jessica asked, her voice trembling. "Because," I said, offering her a cold, final smile, "I think it's time you were formally introduced to your real boss. The Apex Innovations Tower stood like a dagger of blue glass piercing the Dallas sky. It was 48 stories of intimidation, a monolith that screamed power, money, and exclusion. Jessica stood on the sidewalk, craning her neck to look up at the summit. She'd driven past this building 100 times. She'd read about its aggressive market strategies in the Wall Street Journal. But she'd never stepped inside. She adjusted her blazer in the reflection of the revolving doors. She looked tired. The dark circles under her eyes were from a sleepless night spent on the sofa, listening to her mother pace the floor upstairs. She told herself on the drive over that this was just a formality. Marcus was probably a senior project manager here, maybe a department head. He was upset, sure, but he'd calmed down once Jessica showed up at his workplace and charmed him. That was how it always worked. She pushed through the doors and walked to the security desk. The lobby was a cavern of white marble and abstract art that cost more than her car. "I'm here to see Marcus Washington," Jessica said to the guard, flashing her most winning smile. "I'm his wife." The guard looked at a list, then frowned. "I have no Marcus Washington in the directory, ma'am." Jessica's smile faltered. "He works here. He's been here for 6 years. Try Marcus Washington. He uses his full name professionally." The guard's eyebrows shot up. His posture stiffened immediately. He tapped an earpiece. "Dispatch, I have a Mrs. Ashford in the lobby claiming to be the spouse of Mr. Washington." "Affirmative." "Sending her up." The guard stepped out from behind the desk, his demeanor transforming from indifference to terrified respect. "My apologies, Mrs. Ashford. I didn't realize. Please follow me to the executive lift." Jessica frowned. "Executive lift? Is his office not on the trading floor?" "Mr. Washington is on the penthouse level, ma'am." The elevator had no buttons. The guard swiped a key card and the doors slid shut with a pneumatic hiss. The ascent was rapid and silent. Jessica felt her ears pop. She watched the floor numbers blur on the digital display. 10, 20, 30, 40. When the doors opened, she stepped onto a floor that smelled of ozone and fresh orchids. The carpet was thick enough to silence her footsteps. A receptionist sat behind a desk that looked like a piece of modern sculpture. "Mrs. Ashford," she said, standing up. "Mr. Washington is expecting you." Straight down the hall. The double doors at the end. Jessica walked down the corridor. People in expensive suits hurried past her with tablets and files. As they saw her, they stopped. They nodded. One woman murmured, "Good morning, ma'am," with a deferential dip of her head. Jessica felt a surge of confusion. They were treating her like royalty. She puffed out her chest slightly. Maybe Marcus was more important than she thought. Maybe he was a vice president. She reached the double doors, made of frosted glass. She pushed them open. The office was massive. It occupied the entire corner of the building, offering a 200-degree view of the city. But Jessica didn't look at the view. She looked at the man standing by the window. Marcus was not wearing the soft cardigans he wore at home. He was wearing a charcoal gray power suit, tailored to within an inch of its life. His hair was freshly lined. He didn't look like her husband. He looked like a weapon. He turned around. His face was impassive. "Sit down, Jessica," he said. Jessica walked toward the desk. It was a sprawling expanse of black obsidian. And there, sitting on the edge, was a crystal nameplate that caught the morning light. Marcus E. Washington. Founder. Jessica froze. She stared at the letters. Founder. Gio. You run this? The whole thing. "Sit down," Marcus repeated. Jessica sank into the leather chair opposite him. It was low, designed to make the occupant feel smaller than the person behind the desk. Marcus sat down. He didn't ask if Jessica wanted coffee. He didn't ask how she slept. He opened a black folder and slid it across the obsidian surface. "I brought you here because I wanted to explain the new terms of your existence," Marcus said. His voice was cool, devoid of the warmth Jessica was used to. "For the last 5 years, you've been operating under a significant misconception regarding your finances." Jessica looked at the file. It was a spreadsheet. It listed every deposit made into her personal account since their wedding day. "I thought these were returns on my investments," Jessica said, her voice weak. "The crypto. The startups I advised." "You have no investments, Jessica," Marcus said. "The startups you advised all went bankrupt within 18 months. The crypto portfolio you insisted on managing lost 90% of its value in 2019. Then where did the money come from?" "Me," Marcus said. He pointed to a column on the spreadsheet labeled source code, DUP. "That stands for Dependent Support," he explained. "For tax purposes, And to keep your ego intact, I categorized your monthly allowance as a spousal stipend. I paid you $18,000 a month to play businesswoman. I paid for your mother's black card. I paid for the country club. I paid for the lease on your Tesla. Jessica felt the room spinning. You paid me? Like an allowance? Like a child? Like a dependent? Marcus corrected. Or more accurately, like a trophy wife. Except usually trophy wives are better looking and more loyal. He closed the folder. The sound was like a gavel striking a block. As of 9 a.m. this morning, Apex Innovations has ceased all charitable contributions to the Ashford family, Marcus announced. Your stipend is canceled. Victoria's cards are permanently deactivated. The Tesla is a company vehicle, and I've already dispatched a recovery team to collect it from your driveway. The country club membership was a corporate perk which has been revoked. You can't do that, Jessica whispered. How will I live? That's a question you should have asked yourself before you took my credit card to the Ritz-Carlton with Cameron Pierce, Marcus replied. He reached into his drawer and pulled out a second document. It was thinner, stapled in the corner. This is a draft of our divorce agreement, he said, sliding it toward her. It's very simple. I keep the company. I keep the penthouse which I bought 3 years before I met you. I keep all assets acquired with Apex Innovations Capital. And what do I get? Jessica asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and greed. You get your freedom, Marcus said. And you get your debt. I'm generous, however. If you sign this today, agreeing to vacate the penthouse within 48 hours and waiving any right to future litigation, I'll give you a one-time severance payment of $25,000. $25,000? Jessica stood up, her face flushing red. That's an insult. That won't even cover a month of rent in a decent building. Then I suggest you look for an indecent building, Marcus said, not moving a muscle. Or perhaps you can move in with Cameron. Although I suspect his affection is directly tied to your liquidity, which is currently zero. Jessica stared at him. She looked for the man who used to rub her back when she had a headache. She looked for the man who cooked gumbo and listened to her mother's insults with a smile. He was gone. In his place was a titan of industry who looked at her as if she were a bad quarterly report. I won't sign, Jessica said, trying to summon the arrogance her mother had instilled in her. Mom will know what to do. We'll get a lawyer. We'll take half of this company. Read the prenuptial again, Jessica, Marcus said, turning his attention to his computer screen. You can try to fight me. But I have an entire legal department on retainer. And I have evidence of adultery that would make a judge blush. If you fight, you'll lose the $25,000. You'll lose everything. And I'll make sure the court dates are public, so all of Dallas knows exactly who paid for your lifestyle. He typed something on his keyboard. Meeting adjourned, he said without looking up. Jessica stood there for a long moment. She wanted to scream. She wanted to throw the crystal nameplate through the window. But the atmosphere in the room was too heavy. She felt the crushing weight of Marcus's power. She turned and walked to the door. Her legs felt heavy. As she stepped out of the office and back into the hallway, the employees were still rushing by. But this time, the woman who had nodded at her earlier didn't even glance her way. Jessica realized with a jolt that the respect hadn't been for her. It had been for the proximity to Marcus. She walked to the elevator alone. She wasn't the heir to the Ashford legacy anymore. She wasn't a strategic consultant. She was just a woman who had been fired from the best job she would ever have. The elevator doors closed, cutting off the view of the empire she was too stupid to keep. Jessica sat in her car in the Apex Innovations parking garage for 20 minutes, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. She needed to talk to someone. She needed comfort. She needed someone to tell her that everything would be okay. She pulled out her phone and called Cameron. It rang 4 times before he picked up. Hey, Cameron said. His voice was flat, distracted. She could hear music in the background. Laughter. Cameron, Jessica said, her voice breaking. I need to see you. Can I come over? Now's not really a good time. Please. It's important. Marcus is divorcing me. He's taking everything. I don't know what to do. There was a pause. The music in the background got quieter, like Cameron had stepped into another room. Wait, what do you mean he's taking everything? Cameron asked. I thought you had money. I thought your family was loaded. It's complicated, Jessica said. But I need you right now. Can I please come over? Another pause. Longer this time. Jessica, look, Cameron said, his voice taking on a careful, measured tone. I think we need to talk about us. Jessica's stomach dropped. What do you mean? I mean, this whole thing was fun when you were, in a good place financially. But if you're getting divorced and you don't have money, I don't know if this is what I signed up for. What you signed up for? Jessica's voice rose. Cameron, I love you. I left my husband for you. You didn't leave him, Cameron corrected. You cheated on him. There's a difference. And honestly, I thought you were going to divorce him eventually and we'd be together for real. But if you're broke. He trailed off. I'm not broke, Jessica said desperately. I'll get a job. I'll figure it out. We can still be together. Jessica. Cameron's voice was gentle now, the way you'd talk to a child. You're a nice person. But I'm 25. I'm not trying to play house with someone who's going through a messy divorce and has no income. That's not the vibe. The vibe. Jessica felt tears streaming down her face. I bought you clothes. I took you to dinners. Yeah, with your husband's money, Cameron interrupted. Which was weird, by the way. I went along with it because your mom said it was fine, but it was always kind of weird. My mom? Jessica's voice cracked. What does my mom have to do with this? She's the one who introduced us, remember? At that charity thing. She said you were unhappy and that you deserved someone who appreciated you. She said your husband was, what did she call him? Adequate but uninspiring. Jessica's face went white. The champagne glass in her hand trembled, sending tiny ripples across the golden liquid. What did you just say? She whispered. Cameron, oblivious to the shift in the room's atmosphere, continued with the enthusiasm of someone who thought he was sharing a funny anecdote. Yeah. Victoria was so sweet about it. She said you were stuck in a marriage that was holding you back. That Marcus was, what were her exact words? He tapped his chin theatrically. Oh yeah, a placeholder. A means to an end until someone worthy came along. The blood drained from Victoria's face. She set down her wine glass with a sharp clink. Cameron, darling, I think you're misremembering. No, I remember perfectly. Cameron laughed, turning to Jessica. Your mom is hilarious. She said Marcus was like a starter husband. You know, the practice round before you find the real deal. The silence that followed was suffocating. Jessica turned slowly to face her mother. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. You set this up? Jessica, sweetheart, he's confused. You introduced me to Cameron. You told him I was unhappy. Jessica's voice was rising now, each word sharper than the last. You orchestrated this entire thing? I was trying to help you. Victoria's composure cracked. You were wasting your life with that man. I saw an opportunity for you to be with someone from our world, someone who understands our values. Someone you could control, Jessica said, the realization hitting her like a freight train. Someone who would be grateful. Someone who would let you keep living the life you've been living. Cameron looked between the two women, his smile fading. Wait, what's going on? Shut up, Cameron, both women said in unison. Jessica stood up, her legs shaky. She looked around the penthouse she'd believed was hers. The furniture she'd thought she'd paid for. The life she'd thought she'd built. It was all a lie. Every bit of it. And her mother had known. Had orchestrated it. Had used her own daughter as a pawn to maintain her lifestyle. Get out, Jessica said quietly. What? Victoria stood, reaching for her daughter. Jessica, you're being dramatic. Get out. Jessica screamed, her voice raw. Get out of this house. Both of you. This is my home too. Victoria protested. I've lived here for 5 years. This isn't your home. Jessica was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. It was never your home. It's Marcus's home. Everything here is Marcus's. The furniture, the food, the air conditioning, the water, all of it. And I destroyed it. I destroyed everything because you convinced me I deserved better. You do deserve better? Better than what? Better than a man who loved me? Who worked himself to exhaustion to give me everything I wanted? Who never once made me feel like I wasn't enough? Jessica's voice broke. I had better, Mom. I had the best. And you made me throw it away for this? She gestured at Cameron, who was now standing awkwardly by the door, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. I'm going to go, Cameron started. Yes, you are, Jessica said coldly. And you're never coming back. And Mom? She turned to Victoria, her eyes hard. You have until tomorrow morning to pack your things. After that, I'm changing the locks. You can't do that. This is my home. No, Jessica said, her voice eerily calm now. It's Marcus's home. And I'm going to spend every day for the rest of my life trying to make up for what I did to him. starting with removing the parasites. Victoria's face twisted with rage and desperation. You ungrateful little. Get out. The command came not from Jessica but from the doorway. All three of them turned to see Marcus standing there, still in his suit from work, his briefcase in his hand. His face was unreadable. How long have you been standing there? Victoria asked, her voice small. Long enough, Marcus said. He walked into the room, his footsteps measured and deliberate. Long enough to hear Cameron confirm what I already knew. Long enough to hear you admit that you orchestrated my wife's affair. Long enough to hear you call me a placeholder in my own home. He set his briefcase down on the counter with a soft thud. Victoria, you have 1 hour to pack your essentials. The rest of your belongings will be shipped to whatever address you provide. Cameron, you have 5 minutes to leave my property before I call the police and have you arrested for trespassing. You can't, Victoria started. I can, Marcus interrupted, his voice like ice. This is my house. My name is on the deed. My money paid for every stick of furniture, every piece of art, every thread of carpet. You are here because I allowed it. And now I'm revoking that permission. He turned to Cameron, who was already backing toward the door. For minutes, Marcus said. Cameron practically ran out of the penthouse. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the space. Victoria stood frozen, her face a mask of shock and fury. Then, with as much dignity as she could muster, she turned and walked toward the guest suite. The silence that followed was suffocating. Jessica turned slowly to face her mother. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. You set this up? Jessica, sweetheart, he's confused. You introduced me to Cameron. You told him I was unhappy. Jessica's voice was rising now, each word sharper than the last. You orchestrated this entire thing? I was trying to help you. Victoria's composure cracked. You were wasting your life with that man. I saw an opportunity for you to be with someone from our world, someone who understands our values. Someone you could control, Jessica said, the realization hitting her like a freight train. Someone who would be grateful. Someone who would let you keep living the life you've been living. Cameron looked between the two women, his smile fading. Wait, what's going on? Shut up, Cameron, both women said in unison. Jessica stood up, her legs shaky. She looked around the penthouse she'd believed was hers. The furniture she'd thought she'd paid for. The life she'd thought she'd built. It was all a lie. Every bit of it. And her mother had known. Had orchestrated it. Had used her own daughter as a pawn to maintain her lifestyle. Get out, Jessica said quietly. What? Victoria stood, reaching for her daughter. Jessica, you're being dramatic. Get out. Jessica screamed, her voice raw. Get out of this house. Both of you. This is my home too. Victoria protested. I've lived here for 5 years. This isn't your home. Jessica was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. It was never your home. It's Marcus's home. Everything here is Marcus's. The furniture, the food, the air conditioning, the water, all of it. And I destroyed it. I destroyed everything because you convinced me I deserved better. You do deserve better? Better than what? Better than a man who loved me? Who worked himself to exhaustion to give me everything I wanted? Who never once made me feel like I wasn't enough? Jessica's voice broke. I had better, Mom. I had the best. And you made me throw it away for this? She gestured at Cameron, who was now standing awkwardly by the door, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. I'm going to go, Cameron started. Yes, you are, Jessica said coldly. And you're never coming back. And Mom? She turned to Victoria, her eyes hard. You have until tomorrow morning to pack your things. After that, I'm changing the locks. You can't do that. This is my home. No, Jessica said, her voice eerily calm now. It's Marcus's home. And I'm going to spend every day for the rest of my life trying to make up for what I did to him. Starting with removing the parasites. Victoria's face twisted with rage and desperation. You ungrateful little. Get out. The command came not from Jessica but from the doorway. All three of them turned to see Marcus standing there, still in his suit from work, his briefcase in his hand. His face was unreadable. How long have you been standing there? Victoria asked, her voice small. Long enough, Marcus said. He walked into the room, his footsteps measured and deliberate. Long enough to hear Cameron confirm what I already knew. Long enough to hear you admit that you orchestrated my wife's affair. Long enough to hear you call me a placeholder in my own home. He set his briefcase down on the counter with a soft thud. Victoria, you have 1 hour to pack your essentials. The rest of your belongings will be shipped to whatever address you provide. Cameron, you have 5 minutes to leave my property before I call the police and have you arrested for trespassing. You can't, Victoria started. I can, Marcus interrupted, his voice like ice. This is my house. My name is on the deed. My money paid for every stick of furniture, every piece of art, every thread of carpet. You are here because I allowed it. And now I'm revoking that permission. He turned to Cameron, who was already backing toward the door. For minutes, Marcus said. Cameron practically ran out of the penthouse. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the space. Victoria stood frozen, her face a mask of shock and fury. Then, with as much dignity as she could muster, she turned and walked toward the guest suite. This isn't over, she said as she passed Marcus. I'll sue you. I'll take you for everything you have. Try it, Marcus said calmly. I have an entire legal department on retainer. And I have evidence of fraud, conspiracy, and about a dozen other charges I could press if I wanted to. So please, Victoria, try it. I'd love to see you in court. The next morning, Marcus woke up in his own bed, alone for the first time in 4 years. The sheets on Jessica's side were cold, undisturbed. She kept her word and slept in the guest room. He lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, processing everything that had happened. Then he got up, showered, dressed in his sharpest suit and prepared for war. Because that's what this was now. War. Victoria might be gone, but the damage she'd caused would take time to undo. And Marcus was nothing if not thorough. He made coffee, strong and black, and sat at the kitchen island with his laptop. He pulled up the financial records he'd been compiling for weeks. Every transaction, every charge, every penny that Victoria and Jessica had spent. The total was staggering, $347,000 over the past year alone. $347,000 on clothes, jewelry, spa treatments, dinners, gifts for Cameron. $347,000 of his money, spent without a second thought, as if he were an infinite resource. He created a spreadsheet, color-coded and meticulously detailed. Then he sent it to his lawyer with a simple message, I want every penny back. David Chin called him 5 minutes later. Marcus, I understand you're angry, but suing your mother-in-law for reimbursement is going to be difficult. She'll argue it was a gift. It wasn't a gift. It was fraud. She used credit cards issued in my name on my accounts, without my explicit permission for each transaction. That's credit card fraud. You gave her the card. For emergencies. Not for bankrolling my wife's affair. Marcus's voice was steel. I want to press charges, David. Criminal charges. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Marcus, are you sure? This will get ugly. This will be public. Your name will be in the papers. I don't care, Marcus said. I'm done being the quiet one. I'm done letting people take advantage of me because I'm afraid of making a scene. Victoria Ashford committed fraud. I want her prosecuted. Okay, David said slowly. Okay, I'll start the paperwork. But Marcus? This is going to hurt Jessica too. You know that, right? I know, Marcus said. And he did. But he also knew that sometimes, the only way to cut out a cancer was to operate. Even if it left scars. He hung up and turned to find Jessica standing in the doorway, wearing one of his old t-shirts and a pair of sweatpants. She looked small and vulnerable. Nothing like the confident woman who'd walked out of Lux Galleria with shopping bags full of gifts for her lover. You're pressing charges against my mother, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Marcus, please. She's my mother. She's all I have left. She's a criminal, Marcus said flatly. She committed fraud. She needs to face the consequences. She's 62 years old. She'll go to jail. Maybe she should have thought of that before she spent $347,000 of my money. Marcus closed his laptop. Jessica, I need you to understand something. This isn't about revenge. This is about justice. Your mother broke the law. She used me, manipulated you, and destroyed our marriage. She doesn't get to walk away from that. But I'm the one who cheated. Jessica's voice rose. I'm the one who betrayed you. Why are you going after her and not me? Because you're my wife, Marcus said quietly. Or at least you were. And despite everything, I still love you. But your mother? She's never loved me. She's never respected me. She's only ever seen me as a bank account. And I'm done being her ATM. Jessica sank into a chair, her head in her hands. This is all my fault. If I hadn't been so stupid, so selfish. You're right, Marcus interrupted. It is your fault. You made the choice to cheat. You made the choice to lie. But your mother made the choice to facilitate it, to encourage it, to profit from it. And now she's going to pay for it. He stood up, grabbed his briefcase. I have a meeting at 9. I'll be home late. Don't wait up. Marcus, Jessica called as he reached the door. Are we going to be okay? Marcus paused, his hand on the doorknob. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to tell her that they'd get through this, that love would conquer all, that everything would be fine. But he'd never been good at lying. I don't know, he said honestly. I really don't know. And then he left, leaving Jessica alone in the penthouse with her regrets. 3 days later, Victoria Ashford was arrested. It happened at her new apartment, a modest 2-bedroom in a less fashionable part of Dallas that she'd rented with the last of her savings. She was in her bathrobe drinking coffee when the knock came. Victoria Ashford? The officer said when she opened the door. You're under arrest for credit card fraud and identity theft. This is ridiculous. Victoria sputtered as they read her rights. I'm the victim here. My son-in-law is trying to destroy me. You have the right to remain silent, the officer continued, unmoved. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. They handcuffed her, actual handcuffs, cold metal against her wrists, and led her out of the building. Her neighbors watched from their doorways, whispering behind their hands. Victoria Ashford, who had spent her entire life cultivating an image of elegance and superiority, was being perp-walked like a common criminal. At the station they took her fingerprints, her mugshot. They put her in a holding cell with a woman who smelled like cheap vodka and another who wouldn't stop crying. It was the worst day of Victoria's life. Her lawyer, a public defender because she couldn't afford a private attorney, came to see her that evening. Mrs. Ashford, I'm going to be honest with you. This doesn't look good. Mr. Washington has documentation of every charge you made on his credit cards. He has statements showing that you spent over $300,000 in the past year alone. And he has evidence that you used that money to facilitate your daughter's extramarital affair. It was a gift. Victoria insisted. He gave me that card. He told me to use it. For emergencies, the lawyer said, reading from a document. According to the cardholder agreement you signed, the card was issued for emergency use only. A $5,000 watch for your daughter's boyfriend doesn't qualify as an emergency. This is a witch hunt. He's trying to punish me because his marriage fell apart. His marriage fell apart because you helped his wife cheat on him, the lawyer said bluntly. Look, Mrs. Ashford, I can try to negotiate a plea deal. Maybe get you probation instead of jail time. But you need to be realistic. You committed a crime. Multiple crimes. And Mr. Washington has the resources to prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law. Victoria felt the walls closing in. What do you need me to do? Plead guilty. Show remorse. Agree to pay restitution. And pray that the judge is feeling merciful. Victoria closed her eyes. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be her life. But it was. While Victoria was being processed at the police station, Marcus was paying a visit to Cameron Pierce. He'd gotten Cameron's address from the private investigator, a trendy loft in the design district that Cameron shared with 2 roommates. Marcus showed up unannounced, dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, looking nothing like the CEO who'd confronted them at the penthouse. He looked dangerous. Cameron answered the door in boxer shorts and a tank top, his hair mussed from sleep. His eyes widened when he saw Marcus. Mr. Washington. We need to talk, Marcus said, pushing past him into the apartment. The loft was exactly what Marcus had expected. Exposed brick, mismatched furniture, a kitchen that looked like it had never been cleaned. This was where Jessica had been spending her Thursday afternoons. This was what she'd chosen over their penthouse. Look, man, I'm sorry, Cameron started, backing away. I didn't know, Victoria said. I don't care what Victoria said, Marcus interrupted. I care about what you did. You slept with my wife. You let her buy you gifts with my money. You participated in the destruction of my marriage. She told me you guys were basically over. She said you were just staying together for appearances. And you believed her? Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. You really thought a woman would throw away a marriage to a millionaire for a 25-year-old barista? I'm not a barista, I don't care what you are, Marcus said. I care about what you're going to do now. Cameron swallowed hard. What do you want? I want you to disappear, Marcus said simply. I want you to block Jessica's number. I want you to never contact her again. I want you to vanish from her life like you never existed. Okay, Cameron said quickly. Okay, yeah, I can do that. I don't want any trouble. Good. Marcus turned to leave, then paused. And Cameron? If I ever see you near my wife again, if I ever hear that you've contacted her, if I even hear your name in the same sentence as hers, I will destroy you. I will use every resource at my disposal to make sure you never work in this city again. Do you understand? Cameron nodded frantically. Yes, sir. I understand. Good, Marcus said again. And then he left, leaving Cameron shaking in his boxer shorts. Jessica was waiting for Marcus when he got home that night. She'd been crying, her eyes were red and swollen, her face blotchy. They arrested my mother, she said as soon as he walked in. They arrested her, Marcus. She's in jail. I know, Marcus said, setting down his keys. I'm the one who pressed charges. How could you? Jessica's voice broke. How could you do that to her? To me? How could I? Marcus's voice rose. How could you, Jessica? How could you cheat on me? How could you lie to me for months? How could you spend my money on another man and then act like I'm the villain for holding you accountable? She's my mother. She's a criminal? Marcus shouted. She committed fraud. She used my credit cards to buy gifts for your lover. She orchestrated your affair. And you want me to just let that go? She's 62 years old. She could go to prison. Then maybe she shouldn't have committed a crime. Marcus was pacing now, his hands clenched into fists. I am so tired of being the bad guy here. I am so tired of being treated like I'm unreasonable for expecting basic decency and respect. Your mother has been stealing from me for years. Years, Jessica. And you knew. Maybe you didn't know about Cameron, but you knew she was using my money. You knew she was taking advantage of me. And you let it happen because it was easier than standing up to her. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. Marcus roared. It's not fair that I worked my ass off to build a life for us and you threw it away for a 25-year-old with no job. It's not fair that I loved you with everything I had and you couldn't even be bothered to stay faithful. It's not fair that I'm the one who has to be the adult here, who has to make the hard decisions, who has to be the villain in your story because I refuse to be a doormat anymore. Jessica was sobbing now, her whole body shaking. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, Marcus. Please don't do this. Please don't destroy my family. I'm not destroying your family, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. Your mother did that all by herself. I'm just making sure she faces the consequences. He walked past her toward the stairs. I'm sleeping in my office tonight. Don't bother me. Marcus, please. I said don't bother me. He turned and the look on his face made Jessica step back. I have given you everything, Jessica. Everything. And it still wasn't enough. So now I'm done giving. I'm done being the provider, the caretaker, the one who fixes everything. From now on, you're on your own. He went upstairs and Jessica heard the door to his office slam shut. She sank to the floor, her back against the wall, and cried until she had no tears left. Victoria Ashford's trial began on a cold Monday morning in November. The courtroom was packed, partly because of the sensational nature of the case, partly because Marcus Washington was a public figure in the Dallas tech scene. Victoria sat at the defense table in a conservative navy suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked older than her 62 years, the stress of the past few months etched into every line of her face. Marcus sat in the front row of the gallery, his face impassive. Jessica sat on the opposite side of the courtroom as far from Marcus as she could get. She hadn't spoken to him in weeks. The prosecutor was a sharp woman in her 40s named Linda Reyes. She laid out the case with brutal efficiency. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is a simple case of theft. Victoria Ashford was given access to credit cards belonging to Marcus Washington for emergency use only. Instead, she used those cards to fund a lavish lifestyle, a lifestyle that included facilitating her daughter's extramarital affair. She pulled up a slide showing the spreadsheet Marcus had created. The numbers were staggering. Over the course of 1 year, Mrs. Ashford spent $347,000 of Mr. Washington's money. She bought designer clothes, jewelry, spa treatments. She paid for expensive dinners at romantic restaurants. She even bought a $5,000 watch for her daughter's lover. The jury murmured. One woman shook her head in disgust. Mrs. Ashford will try to tell you that this was a gift. That Mr. Washington gave her permission to use these cards however she wanted. But the evidence will show that this is simply not true. Mr. Washington gave Mrs. Ashford access to these cards for emergencies. Medical bills, car repairs, things of that nature. Not for bankrolling an affair. Linda Reyes paused, letting her words sink in. This is not a case about a family dispute. This is a case about theft. Pure and simple. And the evidence will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Victoria Ashford is guilty. Victoria's lawyer, a tired-looking man named Robert Chin, no relation to David, did his best in his opening statement. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a case about a family torn apart by misunderstanding and miscommunication. Victoria Ashford is not a criminal. She's a mother who was trying to help her daughter through a difficult time. Yes, she used credit cards that belonged to her son-in-law. But she did so with his knowledge and implicit permission. Mr. Washington gave her those cards. He never set limits on their use. He never told her she couldn't use them for personal expenses. And now, because his marriage has fallen apart, he's trying to make Mrs. Ashford the scapegoat. It was a weak argument and everyone in the courtroom knew it. The trial lasted 3 days. The prosecution called Marcus to the stand first. Mr. Washington, Linda Reyes said, can you describe your relationship with the defendant? Victoria Ashford is my mother-in-law, Marcus said, his voice steady. Or she was. My wife and I are currently separated. And did you give Mrs. Ashford access to your credit cards? I did. I gave her a supplementary card on my account for emergency use. Did you specify what constituted an emergency? I did. I told her the card was for medical emergencies, car trouble, things like that. Unexpected expenses. Did you give her permission to spend $347,000 on personal luxuries? Absolutely not. Linda Reyes pulled up a bank statement on the screen. Can you identify this transaction? Marcus looked at the screen. That's a charge for $5,000 at a jewelry store. For a watch. Did you authorize this purchase? No. Do you know who the watch was for? Marcus's jaw tightened. It was for Cameron Pierce, my wife's lover. The courtroom erupted in whispers. The judge banged his gavel. Order. Linda Reyes continued. Mr. Washington, did you know that your mother-in-law was using your money to buy gifts for the man your wife was having an affair with? No. I didn't find out until I saw the bank statements. And how did that make you feel? Objection. Robert Chin stood up. Relevance. I'll allow it, the judge said. The witness may answer. Marcus looked directly at Victoria. It made me feel betrayed. Used. Like I was nothing more than a bank account to my own family. The prosecution rested after 2 days. The defense called only one witness, Victoria herself. She took the stand in her navy suit, her hands folded primly in her lap. Robert Chin led her through a series of softball questions about her relationship with Marcus, her intentions, and her understanding of the credit card arrangement. Mrs. Ashford, did you believe you had permission to use Mr. Washington's credit cards? Yes, Victoria said, her voice quavering. He gave me the card. He never said I couldn't use it. I thought I was helping my daughter. I thought I was doing what any mother would do. And did you intend to defraud Mr. Washington? Of course not. He's family. I would never intentionally hurt him. It was a decent performance. But then Linda Reyes stood up for cross-examination. Mrs. Ashford, you testified that you thought you were helping your daughter. Is that correct? Yes. And how exactly were you helping her by buying expensive gifts for her lover? Victoria's face flushed. I wanted her to be happy. You wanted her to be happy. So you facilitated her affair with Mr. Pierce? I didn't facilitate anything. You introduced them, didn't you? Victoria hesitated. Yes, but... And you encouraged their relationship? I thought Cameron was a better match for Jessica. Better than her husband? Better than the man who was paying for your lifestyle? Objection. Robert Chin stood up. Argumentative. Sustained, the judge said. Ms. Reyes rephrase. Mrs. Ashford, did you tell Mr. Pierce that Mr. Washington was adequate but uninspiring? Victoria's face went pale. I may have said something like that. You may have. Or you did. I did, Victoria admitted quietly. And did you tell Mr. Pierce that Mr. Washington was a placeholder until someone better came along? Yes. So you actively encouraged your daughter to leave her husband, the man who was supporting you financially, for another man? I wanted what was best for Jessica. What was best for Jessica or what was best for you? Linda Reyes leaned forward. Isn't it true, Mrs. Ashford, that you were afraid Mr. Washington would cut you off? That you were looking for a replacement? Someone you could control, someone who would be grateful for your help? No. Isn't it true that you spent $347,000 of Mr. Washington's money not to help your daughter, but to secure your own future? That's not true. Then why did you spend $50,000 on yourself? On spa treatments, designer clothes, country club memberships. Victoria's mouth opened and closed. She had no answer. No further questions, Linda Reyes said, sitting down. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood up. On the charge of credit card fraud, we find the defendant guilty. Victoria's face crumpled. Jessica let out a sob from the gallery. Marcus sat perfectly still, his face expressionless. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later. Victoria was released on bail, but everyone knew what was coming. She was going to prison. 2 weeks later, Victoria Ashford stood before the judge for sentencing. She'd lost weight, her suit hanging loose on her frame. She looked like a ghost of her former self. "Mrs. Ashford," the judge said, "you have been found guilty of credit card fraud in the amount of $347,000. This is a serious crime. You violated the trust of your family. You used your position as a mother-in-law to steal from your son-in-law. And you did so without remorse, without consideration for the harm you were causing." Victoria's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, my client is a 62-year-old woman with no prior criminal record. She's already lost her home, her reputation, her relationship with her daughter. I ask the court to show mercy and sentence her to probation rather than incarceration." The judge looked at Victoria. "Mrs. Ashford, do you have anything to say?" Victoria stood, her hands shaking. "Your Honor, I made a terrible mistake. I let my desire to help my daughter cloud my judgment. I never meant to hurt anyone. I never meant for things to go this far. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The judge was unmoved. "Mrs. Ashford, I've reviewed the evidence in this case. I've seen the bank statements, the receipts, the testimony. And I have to say, I don't believe you're sorry for what you did. I believe you're sorry you got caught." He paused, letting his words sink in. "You spent $347,000 of another person's money. You facilitated an extramarital affair. You showed no remorse until you were facing prison time. This court cannot condone such behavior." He looked down at his notes. "I hereby sentence you to 3 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of probation. You are also ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $347,000 to Mr. Washington, plus interest and court costs." Victoria's legs gave out. Her lawyer caught her before she hit the floor. In the gallery, Jessica was sobbing. Marcus sat perfectly still, his face a mask. Justice had been served. But it didn't feel like a victory. 3 months after Victoria's sentencing, Marcus stood in his penthouse, looking out at the Dallas skyline. The space felt different now, emptier, quieter. Jessica had moved out 2 weeks ago, taking her things and leaving behind only memories. They'd finalized the divorce a month earlier. Jessica had signed the papers without protest, without asking for anything. She'd taken her $50,000 settlement and disappeared. Marcus had heard through mutual friends that she was living in a small apartment in Fort Worth, working as a receptionist at a yoga studio. She'd lost weight, cut her hair, and stopped wearing makeup. She looked nothing like the woman he'd married. He should have felt vindicated. He'd won. He'd protected his assets, punished the people who'd wronged him, and emerged from the wreckage with his company and his fortune intact. But standing in his empty penthouse, surrounded by expensive furniture and designer art, Marcus just felt tired. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. "How are you doing, baby?" Marcus smiled. After the divorce, he'd brought his mother to Dallas, set her up in a nice condo near his office. She'd been his rock through everything, the betrayal, the trial, the divorce. She'd reminded him who he was, where he came from, what really mattered. "I'm okay, Ma," he texted back. "Just thinking." "About her?" Marcus hesitated, then typed, "Yeah. You still love her." It wasn't a question. His mother always knew. "I don't know," Marcus typed. "Maybe. But love isn't enough, is it?" "No, baby. Sometimes it's not." Marcus set down his phone and walked to the window. The city stretched out before him, full of lights and life and possibility. He'd built an empire. He'd overcome poverty, racism, and betrayal. He'd proven that he was more than what people assumed, more than the stereotypes, more than the quiet black man in the corner. But he'd also lost the woman he loved. He'd sent his mother-in-law to prison. He'd destroyed a family. Was it worth it? He didn't know. His phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from his lawyer. "Marcus, I wanted to let you know that Jessica has requested a meeting. She says she has something important to tell you. Let me know if you want me to set it up." Marcus stared at the email for a long moment. Then he typed back, "Set it up. But make it public. A coffee shop. I don't want to be alone with her." He hit send and set down his phone. Maybe this was closure. Maybe this was the final chapter. Or maybe it was the beginning of something new. He didn't know. But he was willing to find out. They met at a Starbucks in downtown Dallas, neutral territory. Marcus arrived first, ordered a black coffee and sat at a table by the window. He was wearing jeans and a sweater. Casual, comfortable. He didn't need to impress anyone anymore. Jessica arrived 10 minutes later. She looked different, thinner, paler, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, no makeup, no jewelry. She looked like a completely different person from the woman who'd walked out of Lux Galleria with shopping bags full of designer clothes. She looked real. "Hi," she said, sitting down across from him. "Hi," Marcus replied. They sat in awkward silence for a moment. Then Jessica spoke. "Thank you for meeting me. I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," Marcus admitted. "But I figured I owed you at least one more conversation." Jessica nodded. "I wanted to apologize. I know I've said it before, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry, Marcus. I'm sorry for cheating on you. I'm sorry for lying to you. I'm sorry for taking you for granted. I'm sorry for everything." "Okay," Marcus said. He didn't know what else to say. "I've been going to therapy," Jessica continued, "trying to figure out why I did what I did. And I think I was scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared of you," Jessica said quietly. "Scared of how successful you were, how smart you were, how much you'd accomplished. I felt like I could never measure up. Like I was just along for the ride. And instead of talking to you about it, instead of working on myself, I sabotaged everything. I found someone who made me feel important, who made me feel like I mattered. And I destroyed our marriage in the process." Marcus took a sip of his coffee. "You did matter, Jessica. You always mattered to me." "I know that now," Jessica said, tears welling in her eyes. "But I didn't know it then. I was so caught up in my own insecurities, my own fears, that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. I couldn't see that I had everything I ever wanted." "And now?" Marcus asked. "Now I've lost it all," Jessica said simply. "And I have no one to blame but myself." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Marcus spoke. "I don't hate you, Jessica. I want you to know that. I'm angry, I'm hurt, but I don't hate you. I wouldn't blame you if you did. I know. But hate takes too much energy. And I'm tired." Marcus set down his coffee cup. "I'm tired of being angry. I'm tired of reliving the betrayal. I'm tired of letting what you did define me. So what are you going to do?" Jessica asked. "I'm going to move on," Marcus said. "I'm going to focus on my company, on my mother, on building a life that makes me happy. And I'm going to let go of the past." "Does that mean you forgive me?" Marcus thought about it. "I don't know if I can forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I can accept what happened and move forward. And that's enough for now." Jessica nodded, wiping her eyes. "That's more than I deserve." "Probably," Marcus agreed. "But I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me." They talked for another hour, about the divorce, about Victoria, who was serving her sentence at a minimum security facility, about their lives now. It was strange talking to Jessica like this. Like they were strangers who used to know each other. Maybe that's what they were. When they finally stood up to leave, Jessica hesitated. "Marcus? Do you think we'll ever be friends?" Marcus considered the question. "I don't know. Maybe. Someday. But not now. Right now I need space. I need time to heal." "I understand," Jessica said. "And Marcus? For what it's worth, you were never adequate or uninspiring. You were extraordinary. You are extraordinary. And I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." She turned and walked out of the coffee shop, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. He sat back down, finished his coffee, and looked out the window at the city he'd conquered. He'd lost a wife. But he'd found himself. And in the end, that was worth more than any marriage. Marcus Washington stood on the stage at the Dallas Convention Center, looking out at a crowd of 5,000 people. He was giving the keynote speech at TechCrunch Disrupt, one of the biggest tech conferences in the world. "When I started Apex Innovations 10 years ago," he said, his voice carrying through the auditorium, "I had nothing but a laptop, a dream, and a stubborn refusal to accept the limitations other people tried to place on me. I was a black kid from Baltimore with no connections, no trust fund, no safety net. All I had was my brain and my determination." The crowd applauded. "I faced a lot of obstacles in my career. Racism. Classism. People who underestimated me because of where I came from or what I looked like. But the biggest obstacle I ever faced wasn't external. It was internal. It was learning to value myself, to recognize my own worth, to refuse to accept less than I deserved. He paused, letting his words sink in. A year ago, I went through a very public, very painful divorce. My personal life became tabloid fodder. People I trusted betrayed me. And for a while, I let that define me. I let the anger and the hurt consume me. But then I realized something. I realized that I am not defined by what other people do to me. I am defined by how I respond. And I chose to respond with grace, with dignity, and with an unwavering commitment to my own self-worth. The crowd was silent, hanging on his every word. So my message to you today is this: know your worth. Don't let anyone, not your family, not your friends, not your romantic partners, make you feel like you're less than you are. You are valuable. You are worthy. And you deserve to be treated with respect. The applause was thunderous. After the speech, Marcus was surrounded by people wanting to shake his hand, take selfies, exchange business cards. He smiled and chatted and networked, playing the part of the successful CEO. But when he finally escaped to his hotel room that night, he felt the familiar weight of loneliness settle over him. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. His thumb hovered over Jessica's name. He'd never deleted it, but he didn't call. Instead, he called his mother. "Hey, Ma. Hey, baby. I watched your speech online. You were amazing." Marcus smiled. "Thanks, Ma. How are you feeling?" "Tired," Marcus admitted. "But good. I think I'm finally starting to heal." "I'm proud of you, Marcus. You've been through hell and you came out stronger." "I had a good teacher," Marcus said. "You taught me to never give up. To never let anyone make me feel small." "That's right," his mother said. "You're a Washington. We don't quit." They talked for another hour about everything and nothing. When Marcus finally hung up, he felt lighter. He walked to the window of his hotel room and looked out at the Dallas skyline. The city lights twinkled like stars, full of promise and possibility. He'd lost a lot in the past year. But he'd also gained something invaluable: himself. And that was worth more than any marriage, any fortune, any success. Marcus Elijah Washington was free. And he was just getting started.